Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their existing skill set. Every week at 2 p.m. on Fridays, we go live with a film professional to chat and give you a chance to ask your questions. Today, I'm being joined by director and editor Kabir Akhtar, whose work includes Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Arrested Development, and Never Have I Ever. Hi Kabir, welcome to the show.
It's good. You said hi right as I was having a sip of tea. So that was smart. That was good timing by neither of us.
So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you is because you originally, when I met you, you were working on Arrested Development and you've transitioned into doing a lot of directing. So for people who are wanting to get into directing, how did you make that transition?
Slowly. Wow. I guess, yeah, you and I first met. Was that really like 7 or 8 years ago, which
Yeah,
is stunning. Well, you look great.
thank
I feel like
you. You too.
it's hard, man. Thanks. I feel like it's hard. It took a really long time to make the turn. I feel like my whole career has been making turns from like where I am here to like this place to this place. I mean, I started off cutting nonfiction and like documentary, and like that sort of gave way to music video and gave way to reality, and like getting from here to like cutting these sort of nonfiction, cable series to like moving to like directing, like these like Netflix and so on streaming episodic series was a very zigzaggy path. It's a it's hard to do. I think that for people that are like looking to get into it, uh, it's you just need to know that it's challenging, um, and you need to know that it's possible. Like it does work. I have obviously a lot of friends now who are doing it. We did not start off directing big brand name shows,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it takes a lot of work, both working on your talent level and like your skill set, and then also working your relationships and connections to help the two of them come together in an epic luck storm where suddenly things start going well. Because I do say it a lot that like I think that every single person who's having any kind of success in a career in entertainment was talented and knew people and also got lucky. Everybody. You see, like the Oscars, people win and it's great, but like everyone was like, thanks to people that helped them, and every single one of those people got lucky at some point in some way. Not that you weren't good, but you need something, some chance to break your way to.
So what was the first project that you, I guess, made that you would consider was your lucky sort of jump to directing?
It's funny. I feel like I had a lot. There's been like a many multi-step process. I always feel like I wish I had just like one answer, and I could give you one answer, but like I'm also long-winded and verbose, so I think it takes a lot of time. I've talked about this before, but I feel like you read articles about like this person who broke through and like directed this big feature, and it's like, yeah, they were working as a PA on this one show. And then they directed this movie, and now they've directed 5 movies. You're like, what happened in there, man? Like, that's the stuff that I think people are interested in hearing about. I had, while I was editing, like at the beginning of my career and working my way up at many levels, I would like just make the noise about like wanting to be directing, and people would give me opportunities to like shoot parts of things and shoot shorts and go do a pickup shoot or a second unit shoot, and they were like non-union and they were like not paying, and I was like, it doesn't matter. I needed the experience and they just to understand, just to get practice, just to do it. Um, the two big things that happened. One was I was meeting with Tracy Ullman about editing her show on Showtime like 12 years ago, and she was great. And in that meeting, mentioned that she and her husband were producing a series, a half-hour series in England. And I mentioned immediately being interested in directing it. And we just kept talking about it, and we worked together for a few weeks, and they incredibly offered me some episodes of that show to direct. It was my first half hour I did. And then, fast forward another 7 or 8 years, I was cutting on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and they knew that I wanted to be directing. And I edited the pilot of that show, got it picked up, became a core member of the team, and I got to direct an episode of the second season, and then that led to more, which has now led to it being a full-time affair.
There's one show that you were a part of that at first I was like, I'm not gonna watch that. And my wife was like, no, you gotta watch this show. And that's BH
Whatever.
90210.
Oh yeah. I was like, whatever it is, I feel that way sometimes too.
I'm so upset that it got canceled because it was such a clever sort of approach.
Yeah, it was really fun.
What was your involvement with it? Like, and how did you work with the actors to get them, I guess, back into that place, but in sort of, I guess, tongue-in-cheek approach.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I directed. They did 6 episodes. I directed number 5. So by the time I got there, they were already, mostly like they had a lot of momentum going. I did feel very strongly that I like to empower actors the same way that when I was editing, I liked like producers or directors to come in and empower me. Was not a fan of when people would come in and be like, good morning. So here's how we're gonna do. At this time, good, we're gonna do this. At this, like, can we take some I'm like, yo, like, can we like get to know each other, talk, like get into a creative space?
Mhm.
And the same thing with actors. I'm like, if you don't want to just be told like, do this line this way, do this, it's like, let's find a story and like empower people to do what they're doing. And so I think these guys, my sense is like, I want work to be fun and like things to be fun at work. And so just to be like, let's keep it light and like keep ideas flowing, just jam on like collaborating. And they all knew their characters so well that for me, it's just about shaping and like, sort of stepping back and looking at how this is all going to cut together and thinking about like what tones and shape we can aim for and what story we're trying to tell. I mean, that's just true on every show, though, I think.
So what are some of the tricks to getting them back into that space? Like you were talking about talking to them about it, but what are some of the things
I think you want to just listen more than anything, like listen to see where they are. And then ideally as a director, you've got an idea of where you want to go.
Mhm.
And then it's just a matter of like, it's different in every case with every person, just trying to like understand like, okay, I think you're here and we're trying to get you to be like here. So like, and then what does it take to get, this specific person to go this way to this place? Because some people are, don't want a lot of like specific feedback. Some people are dying for specific feedback. I'm like, but again, it's the same with editors too. Like some people just want like really detailed notes and they'll just like do them. And some people want like someone to come into the room and hang out and like, let's work on this thing together. And, other people that stresses that out. So it's really just about finding who you collaborate well with. And those are the kind of special things. Like when you find anyone that you're like, oh, great, we like vibe. Like then you can kind of jam and
Yeah.
I think you can always see that the finished product comes out better in those
Yeah.
cases. I mean, working with like Shannon Doherty was great because she was I found her to be such a chill and like open collaborator and someone who's very demanding and wanted like in a cool way, who wanted like things to be as, authentic and like real and like, serious as possible. And it really was like, great, I'm completely on board. And like, she would be like, this thing doesn't make any sense to me the way it is. I'm like, yeah, I completely agree. Let's find a better way to do it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Was there anything you brought from the edit suite or that you learned in the edit suite that you bring to directing?
Oh my God, I think everything. I have a lot of friends who direct. I don't understand how they do it. The ones that weren't editors ever, I don't understand how it's possible. I mean,
Why is that?
I, look, I say this a lot, but like editing is like cooking and directing is like going shopping for ingredients. Right. And like you show up in
Yeah.
post and you're like, here's ingredients. Like, and someone else like cooks them together. And just for reference, like I'm a lousy real life cook, but like I'm also I'm not a great ingredient getter as a result because I don't always know. I'm like, oh, these potatoes should be diced or sliced or canned or pressed or juiced or whatever they are, right?
Yeah.
But like if I knew exactly what I wanted to be assembling, then it would be easier for me to go and make sure we get those parts like at the on set. And so it's made it so much easier just to be like midway through a take and be like, okay, we don't need the rest of it. Let's not wear the cast out. Also, the clock is always running. So like, let's just keep moving. Let's keep moving. And make people feel like we're having a, efficacious and fun day instead of like, doing 9 takes of something that we don't need to keep doing over and over. If we're just trying to get this one piece.
What? So, because you've done a lot of comedy, and so how do you get into, I guess, the mindset of comedy or a sense of timing and rhythm? Because a lot of comedy comes from how it's delivered and how it's sort of executed. So how do you get into that space and how did you get, I guess, honed on comedy?
I think, practice for a long time and like working with people who were better than I was.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's the name of the game, right? Like, I think if you arrive at a point early in your career, especially where if you were like the best person in the room or the smartest person in the room, it's not great.
Hmm.
You're sort of not getting opportunities to learn and improve, and just what you need. I was very fortunate to get to work with a lot of big name comedians, a lot of big name talent when I was cutting. And learn by like listening, and you learn by doing, and so sometimes you learn by failing. And definitely just to be like, okay, this works, this doesn't work, this person likes this, these different people. You just get used to seeing a lot of different kind of like ways that people like to work and what works and what doesn't. You hate to say that some people just aren't funny, but like some people have different senses of what that is. People have
Yeah.
different senses of humor, and like what that means to different senses, different people, really shows through in dailies and in a cut for sure.
Mhm.
Because cuts ideally are not just taking the timing from actors. You're like, you're speeding things up and slowing things down and like stopping for reactions and like doing punchlines on time. And like, I don't know. I had a meeting once with an agent, like, yeah, right around the time that we met,
Yeah.
who I was telling them about a comedy series I'm working on. They're like, oh, I love that show so much. And I love this one actor's comic timing. And I'm like, you love that actor's comic timing? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, whose comic timing do you think you're watching? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, you're watching the editor's comic timing. You're not watching the cast's comic timing. You think that reaction came exactly at this point in reaction to this thing? Like, that is a thing that's done in post. It's not from the set.
Yeah.
And I remember they were like, oh my God. And I was like, yeah.
So, what would you say was the most challenging scene for you to have directed in your career?
Oh my God. Man, it depends. I mean, there have been scenes where there was difficulty for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes you have, especially as a freelance director, you show up something, you don't always have control over who's on the crew. So sometimes I think probably the hardest things that I've done involved crew members where we didn't see eye to eye, because even with cast, when you sort of aren't on the same page, like you can get on the same page, and the cast usually knows what they're doing. They're looking for an earnest performance and understands how to play things. So even I haven't really been in a situation where an actor was just like, no, and I was like, oh, well, we're like toast because this person's doing it all wrong. They might have been doing it a way that wouldn't have been my instinct, but I'm like, great, that works. Like it works. We're not like dead in the water. But I think, yeah, and there's scenes even like that are challenging visually with like I've shot stuff where there's like 400 people on camera, and it's like, okay, those are challenging but fun and really uplifting, and like you kind of are able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Truly the difficulty is having when you're in a situation where you have to collaborate with people that you are not good collaborators like together.
Yeah. Is there a scene, I guess a better way of putting it, is there a scene that you're most proud of, that you're like, oh, I really nailed it there?
There are a bunch for sure. There's a lot, and they're all, and the thing is, I think so many of them are all different. There have been things where I was just proud of like the way, I mean, I directed some episodes of Never Have I Ever last season, and just really proud of the way some of those things come out. There's small details that I think for me are like, sort of like directing nerdy details, but like that end up being, they weave into the fabric of an episode so that you're emotionally involved and you're in the story. And like, there's a scene in episode 5 of that show where they're trying, like the kids are on like a school field trip, like an overnight field trip, and they're staying this like Days Inn or whatever, and they're trying to find alcohol, which is a relatable story. And it was just, I was like looking just to shoot at a little Ocean's 11-y, like it's like a minute long heist that happens in this. And just doing sort of like longer steady cam moves and like spinning around people, and like they have to hide in the closet, and the closet was like way too small for us to shoot in, and like just given what we had to do, and the walls were being pulled out and we were out of time. And I just like dug the way it all kind of came together. But also a lot of music videos that I've shot for shows like Crazy Ex and High School Musical. Same deal, And next week there's a show coming out on Netflix that I directed some of called Julie and the Phantoms, which is like a half-hour musical drama.
Okay.
And same thing, it was really, really proud of the way some of those music videos came out.
So when you say music videos, you mean like a segment within the film or the show?
Yeah, like a whole, like there's all 3 of those shows that I just mentioned were like musical series.
Yeah.
So it was like breaks into like a whole musical number unfolds within the episode. Sometimes like 2, or I've done episodes where there were like 7 musical numbers in an episode, which was like really fun to shoot and like fun to think about, conceptualize. You could really kind of go nuts visually. There's one in episode 8 of Julie and the Phantoms that I fucking loved. That was just, it's on the page. Sometimes you get these script pages and they're like, okay, here's the story we're trying to tell. And for me, it's about how do we elevate this visually and make it really compelling and interesting while also not just doing kind of like, cool shit that doesn't serve the story. Like you have to find a way to like do stuff. So there's like a thing that happens that starts unfolding as a flashback that a kid is like, sadly recounting the story of bad things that happened to him in the past. And yeah, just like, I was like, let's just think about like, we should like get a motion control rig and do like a multi-layer pass of the same shot through this room. So the time sort of like is rewinding in front of us, but in a way that also makes sense and tracks emotionally and like fits the music. And just really proud of that one too.
Because I've worked on like small musical pieces, but I've never worked on like a massive musical, and definitely haven't worked on set. So what were some of the challenges that you faced as a director working on musicals on set?
I think a lot of it is in the concept stage, just like making sure that like when so much, it's true, like 90% of the headaches you're going to have, you could have solved in prep. It's just true. So like how constantly to be thinking ahead, so that the day can go smoothly, and then you've got like opportunities to like let the actors have fun with it, let like the crew guys have fun with it, like, and have fun with it yourself, just to be like making sure that we're staying loose and we can improvise within the framework that we've built. So for a lot of these music videos, it's about spending the time conceptualizing and seeing like what this thing could look like. Like here it is on this page. It says that like there's one in Julie and the Phantoms again that was written as like it takes place in the gym, and a lot of that was this fantasy number breaks out that this high school girl is like sort of with the guy she's got a crush on, and like a whole dance number breaks out. And it says it's like in the gym, but a lot of that had to do with like that's where they were, and then there's like logistical reasons we had to be in the school gym that day. There were no other date. We couldn't. The location was so far away, we couldn't drive anywhere else.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, I don't think any like high school girl's fantasy is to like have a dance going on in the school gym, right? Like maybe we can build a part of the gym that just looks completely different. And it was like literally on a piece of paper somewhere that I was like, what if it looked like this and had like black, just the whole background was all black, but it was like billowy white curtains and like candles and like a shiny black floor. And we'll just do it inside the gymnasium, but it won't look like the gym. We'll just physically be here and roll cameras in there and shoot it. And it worked. It was great. It's really, really uplifting and beautiful. And, we're able to do a lot of like 360 shots, which was like really exciting to see. So stuff like that. I think that's the challenge is like making sure that you've thought it through ahead of time. Because the worst is you get there on the day and you're like, oh, if only we had brought in a whole bunch of fake trees and this thing would look cooler. Now it's too late, Yeah.
Well, how you mentioned, giving them the space to ad lib, but how the heck do you ad lib with a playback track?
Well, you're not ad-libbing dialogue necessarily, but it becomes a performance, like it's pre-choreographed, but you're still trying to find ways to like, you're constantly, it's like jamming. Like if you play music with people, it's the same thing. It's like, you don't just like want to show up and play covers all day. I mean, maybe you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, if you can like, or just playing and all of a sudden like you start getting inspired, you're like, oh, what if we like just did this instead? And just making sure you've left yourself the room for the cast to be like, actually, if I did this thing, because you'll get pitches from the cast all day long, like, well, if we did this, what about this? And you're like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And we have the space to do it, and we have the time to film it, and we have like, can think about how this will cut together later.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you mentioned music. Do you play a music instrument?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Played the bass for many years. Yeah.
The bass? Oh, I play the bass too.
Maybe it's a post thing. I don't know. I mean, playing the bass is like you're doing melody and rhythm at the same time, which is kind of like what you're doing when you're cutting, right? Like you've got to be thinking both like sort of like systemically, but also like creatively and organically, and sort of be subjective and objective at the same time.
Yeah. Now you won an Emmy. So what did you win the Emmy for?
For cutting the pilot of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
And so what were some of the challenges in that show, and especially in a pilot, because you're creating the template for the rest of the series?
Yeah, I cut a lot of pilots. I've cut 10 that have been picked up.
Wow.
I don't know. I think that a lot of the fun is just like really committing to the idea of it, like whatever it is, whatever the world is, like you're like, okay, what is this world? And like, what stories are we trying to tell, but like, and emphasize what moments are we looking to like shade in a more positive or negative or more dramatic or like, frantic way, whatever it is. Like, I think that really, I've been asked in like meetings when I was cutting, they're like, so what's your kind of like editing style? I'm like, I don't know. It's about telling the story more than anything else, I remember I was in one meeting where they're like, hey, we watched like your reel when I had a reel back in the day. And they're like, it seems like stuff is kind of cut, sort of quickly. Is that sort of what you do? And I was like, no, those are just the way those shows were, right? That's what they called for.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, it's like you're kind of like a session musician. Like you're showing up to be like, what are we trying to do? Okay, I'll fit into this. But then also to like expand this a bit and be like, now let's turn this into like something that is not only appropriate for what we're trying to do, but is hopefully also unexpected. And like I think you get led there yourself by like working on it and working on it. Really, like a point comes, I think, a lot of times when you're doing a cut or when you're shooting a scene and you're like, we're trying to line this thing up, and I'm always looking to do things a way that I have not done them before. I think it totally works sometimes to be like, we're gonna start this scene with this wide, and then like we're gonna like kind of get in closer and do this and use this one. You don't have to, I mean, maybe it's more fun to start like somewhere else, start on the person who's not talking. I mean, you try those things and you see like the scene suddenly feels very different. It's like it becomes about something different. It just shifts the entire perspective of the story that's being told, and the emotional experience you have as a viewer watching it, right? Like that's the most fun part. So in doing pilots, it's like Crazy X was a musical. We were looking for ways to earn our transitions on the way in songs and out of songs, but also like to really stop and understand what the world is. There's a part in the first 5 minutes of that pilot where it's like it starts, she's at summer camp and is really happy and gets into a fight with her mom, and then hard cuts to 10 years later and she's miserable and just living this sad, depressing life. And then it just becomes about pacing and about sound. It's like, let's have all the background noise. Like, could it be louder and in her face? Could it be like smaller and more surround channel? Like, there's a lot to play with, and there's no rules really, right? I mean, there's rules, but like, break those rules, see what works, see what feels right. I think if you go with what feels right, then like, you'll end up in a good place.
What's interesting is you mentioned that it's, buying into the idea, or, be really sort of giving your all to the idea, which is something I always hear about people talking about when they talk about actors. So if they see a movie, they'll be like, that was a crazy idea, but the actors just went for it and they just bought into the idea. And I've never heard it used for an editor. So that's actually a really good way
Oh
to
my
think
god,
about it.
totally. I mean, pretty much everything I ever worked on, you come across some point where you're working on this footage and it's kind of like it's all fit together, but it's not sort of like alive.
Hmm.
And then like just sort of playing it back and forth and like dragging back and forth across it, looking at it, wondering why isn't this feel any? There's no magic to it. It's not like the cut doesn't sort of have any shimmy. It's just kind of like lying there, and you're like, what can I do to like inflate this? And suddenly I'm like, oh, I found this to be so true consistently, career wise, even directing now, where I'm like, oh, if we could do this one thing, I was like, I'm just gonna do this one thing for a minute. It's insane, and it's like too weird. It's too weird. Like, no, it's too weird. I'm just gonna do it like for myself, to take the 5 minutes and put it together. So I'll be like, oh yeah, that was fun. And I have found consistently, nearly 100% of the time, those things are the best things. And someone will come in, I'll be like, I did this weird thing. I want to look at it. It's pretty weird. And they're like, oh my god, let's do that, because if it's still true to the story, but if it's a little unexpected, it's invigorating, can be exciting just to watch, and more compelling and like gripping to be like, as a viewer, see something that's just like slightly different, as long as it is not like completely bananas. But even if it's completely bananas, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you try something and you're like, oh, yeah, this just adds some feeling here that otherwise, if you're just kind of coloring by numbers, none of us, I don't think, got into this to color by numbers. We all got into this because it seemed exciting, and like there were, in a way, no rules, and like anything could happen. But if you want anything to happen, you have to be willing to do anything.
It makes me think of that. There's always that story about George Lucas directing Star Wars, and he just kept telling the actors to do it faster with more energy. And that was his. Just do it faster, more energy.
Yeah, it worked.
So when you worked on Arrested Development, what were some of the challenges of that show?
I mean, it was there's a lot. I mean, it was, by the time I got there, it was already a hit show. So you're trying not to mess things up. You're also trying to like hew to the template that already exists, while also like trying to keep it, alive and moving. It's really just about trying to be part of the team, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know, what kind of challenges are you looking for?
Well, I'm just thinking, because whenever I've dealt with comedy or comedy situations, I always find that, there's so many different sensibilities in comedy. that you have to sort of, get into the same track as the person or get on the same mindset and then try work it out and figure it out. So I'm just wondering, whenever I hear, you've got so many different comedy experiences behind you, I find that interesting and would love to know how you approach that with Arrested Development.
It's the same thing. I mean, it's kind of trite, but yeah, I think you got to be listening to people, and especially when you show up on a show that already exists. But even still, if you're showing up on a pilot or on a season 1 show, like you are looking for, on a feature, you're looking to like connect with the tone of the person in charge and try to, mimic that and expand it, right? Like be like, okay, how can we best represent this thing that you are trying to do? Person in charge, director, producer, network, whatever it is. Which takes practice. I mean, it's about being flexible. I think, especially in post, like you are trying to fit into the style of show. And some things, people are different. I've worked for showrunners who like, I don't know, like somebody like, picks up their phone and like, or whatever, and like wants to see like an insert of the thing on the phone. And there are working showrunners who are like, absolutely not. Why would we ever cut to this thing here? We don't want to stop and read this joke. Like we'll just move on past it. We'll understand it. People have these different sensibilities. And I think a great way to succeed in these situations is to talk to the people that you are, working with before you start about tone. I mean, everything is about tone. If you can talk about tone and style and what people like and what they don't like expectation wise, like do people like big close-ups or people like into cool overhead shots? Does this one producer hate shots of people in bed where they're propped up? There's like so many little things, and I think it's easy to feel like you got to show up and like make it all up on your own and be like, well, this is what I do. And I'm like, yeah, I think that we work in a collaborative medium, all of us, in this industry, and there's a lot more to success to be had and a lot more sort of clarity of mind to be gained by communicating with people before you start.
Now, I have one last question that I've been asking people during the pandemic. What have you been watching during the pandemic that you would recommend to people?
Well, I mean, look, man, I finally got to watch all of The Wire, which I've been meaning to do for like 18 years or whatever it is. Finally got to do it.
Wait until you see Breaking Bad.
Right, exactly. We'd already seen Breaking Bad. It was great. We actually just started last week. We started Ozark. We're super into it. We're just like plugging away, and I think we'll be done in a few weeks. Which has been really, really fun. It's just like a good opportunity to catch up and kind of see what's out there, and just to get a chance to like. For me, I mean, even when I was like a lot younger, I constantly, and still to this day, when I watch something that I think is really fun and uplifting, I spend a lot of time rewinding and fast forwarding it to be like, how did they do this? Like, how can I deconstruct like what shots were in it? Like thinking about like, once I've had a really legitimately strong emotional experience of something, just to rewind it and be like, hold on, like, let's just take it apart and see what they did. Because if the more we're all standing on the shoulders of the giants that have come before us. And like, the more you can kind of like, be like, I love that this is a cool idea. I was like, I never would have gone from this, like, dollying insert to this overhead. Like I wouldn't have thought to do that, but here it totally worked because it was doing this thing, like, and just to throw it in the old bag of tricks so that, you have more things that you studied and thought about and be like, okay, because we need to, we want to like recapture things and be like, oh, I saw this one thing, this shot I did in this episode was inspired by this movie I saw 12 years ago. Little bits. I mean, and I think that's part of the best part of having time off.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you again.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah.
It's been fun. I can't believe it's been that many years.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll have to catch up next time I'm in LA.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, next time you're allowed to into our
exactly
busted country.
Well, have a good weekend, eh?
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.